Welcome back to another episode of the BioHub. Today, I'm joined by Gerardo Ubaghs, CFO of Frontier Medicines, a clinical company using chemoproteomics and covalent chemistry, initially focused on target oncology. Before biotech, Gerardo spent over a decade in investment banking, leading over $100 billion plus in M&A and $12 billion plus in capital raises. And before that, he was a professional violinist performing all over the world. A physicist, musician, financier, and now biotech exec, Gerardo brings a seriously unique perspective to the table. So let's get into it. Pleasure to have you, Gerardo.
Pleasure to talk to you again. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while. Let's just talk about that unique journey that I just mentioned. Violinist, investment banker, and now biotech CFO. Just what's the story behind that path?
Yeah, so thanks for the intro, by the way, and I'm really happy to be here. It's been long in the making, and love your podcast. Happy to be here. So let's have fun. The story is actually relatively simple when you think about it in hindsight. So I was a science kid, right? Loved science since the get-go, but at the same time in Spain, where I was born and grew up for the most part, also started playing violin at a young age, at age 5, like most professional people do. And at some point when graduating high school, at that time you could also graduate violin at the same time. So finished conservatory at age 18. That started to go fairly well. So I had to make a choice and decide whether to go the science route or continue to give violin a fair shot. So I took the latter and developed a professional career in that. After having lived and performed around the world, the other side of my brain kept poking at my other interest, and I decided to take another degree in finance and econ, and then pursue an MBA to jump into investment banking. The reason I wanted to do investment banking is because that was the perfect mix of performing in terms of preparing materials, talking to people, interacting with them, and having that aspect that I missed in performing in violin, but at the same time be deeply involved in science. So when I did investment banking, I knew I wanted to do biopharma, which is what I spent 12 plus years doing thereafter at Bank of America in New York. And then fast forward to now. I was lucky enough to make managing director, partner, they call it in different places. But I found myself missing getting my hands a bit dirtier and actually helping companies really build the products and the development candidates and working with the full team in the companies as opposed to be the advisor in these transactions. And that's where, it was a bit of a push and pull. So I was feeling that need, but at the same time, investors and board members that had known me for the past 12 plus years also started to tell me, look, you're doing great in banking, but if you at some point want to join us, right? We think we trust you with running companies that we invested in as well. So if you ever think about doing this, we'll help you out. And that's how it came to be. That was about a year and a half or so now. And I've been at Frontier for the past 8 months now. And it's been an incredibly exciting journey so far.
Yeah, amazing. I think, it's probably one of the more unique journeys that I've seen in biotech, at least. And I've looked at a lot of different careers, as you can imagine. It sounds like you had a bit of choice in terms of going from investment banking to a biotech. What attracted you to Frontier? Made you decide that it was the right next step?
The main reason was one, that there was sort of warm introductions being made to a handful of select companies, right? When I was considering this by investors, and that kind of ensured a couple of things. One being that kind of warm intro essentially makes sure that the team and you are somewhat alike and like-minded. So the team that is behind Frontier is top notch. I'm not only talking about extremely experienced folks. So Chris Pharma, our co-founder and CEO, co-founded Blueprint Medicines, co-founded Warp Drive Bio, which eventually merged into Revolution Medicines and created the science that Revolution Medicines is based on now. So, extremely experienced CEO on the company side, but also spent a decade plus on the venture capital side, funds like Third Rock Ventures, NPM, and others. And then before that, doing pharma as well, and a PhD in molecular bio as well. So people that are extremely experienced at what they do, but at the same time are also incredibly nice people, which I know sounds easy to say, but it's also relatively hard to find. And so the team was really important. Number two, the science is outstanding. When I looked at what they were doing and how they are doing it, it was a no-brainer that I wanted to be part of something this exciting. And then third, the fact that they're doing it with computationally enabled aspects completely built in from the get-go and completely interwoven with biology from the beginning, as opposed to try to slap on the AI or ML moniker after the fact. Really attracted me to that. When I was at B of A, I spent some time developing a franchise in computationally enabled drug discovery. So I took Schrödinger public, worked on recursion and Exantia and a couple of others. And when I saw this, right, I said, okay, this is something I understand. This is something I like. The physics background is something that also attracted me to the way they do things. And fourth and last, the investor syndicate that was behind the company already. If you look at the board and who was backing the company for the past 6 years, we're also the who's who of biotech, right? So I feel like I was very lucky to be able to be part of the story, and grateful that the team allowed me to join.
I don't suppose you know the answer to this, but did you know this was the path you were going to lead, and eventually you would end up in a role like this?
No, you never know. No, without digressing too much, but my life has always been about not necessarily knowing the path, but having more of a feeling as to what I wanted to do next, right? So I'll leave you with two thoughts. One is I always look at things in terms of adding tools to your kit, right? So every degree or studies that I've done have been not necessarily with the aspiration to get a position or join an industry. It's been more with the idea of I'm genuinely intrigued in this area, and I just want to add tools to the kit in that particular area, and then as a result of that, be very conscious that when new opportunities present themselves, as a result of adding those tools to your kit, you should be able to recognize them and jump on them, right? So that's the philosophy. And then the second point is, yes, there's always a bit of knowing which direction you want to go into. So for example, when I was a violinist, some of the things started to go on autopilot, right? You sort of had a path, you had some inertia in the industry, but then if the back of your head keeps nagging at you and keeps telling you, I'm intellectually curious, I want to pursue economics, finance, science, something that mixes both. I didn't necessarily know I wanted to do investment banking, but I knew that a way to explore more avenues and add more tools to your kit was getting a degree in business to get a foundation of that. But then also doing business school, and the business school that I attended, Indiana University, had a good program in finance, had a good program in consulting, had a really good program in banking. And I knew the environment as well, because that's where I went to music school before as well. So I knew that directionally that would give me, windows that would open and a base to network off of. And only then did I start networking and figuring out that banking was that, right? And then the same thing in banking, apply the same philosophy. When I was in banking, I was just adding tools to the kit and making sure that I knew how companies operated to the best I could, trying to build good relationships to the best you can, try to be a decent person to the best you can, to management teams, investors. And then at some point, these things tend to happen naturally, right? You start to feel the pull. You also start to get intellectually curious about it. And it took a little bit. I mean, I remember the first board member that suggested I should look at that as I was thinking about it at the same time. It's almost like you could smell it. Was in the middle of 23. And I only, joined Frontier in June of 24, right? So, and it was a completely different board member of a completely different company that is now public as well. But again, these things, you have to sort of ride the wave of Surface A and just be ready for what comes.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And then just to bring it back to Frontier as well, you mentioned the science and the platform. What do you think sets it apart from other companies?
Yeah. The thing I would say is the company has been about 6-7 years in the making. So it's been incubating a lot of good data and science. And I'll leave you with a couple of tidbits, right? Because sort of numbers and stats are sometimes easier to remember. So one thing that sets Frontier apart is we've been generating proprietary data in live cells. And that essentially has enabled the company to generate about 1 terabyte of chemoproteomics data per week since inception. What that enables us is essentially to have 90% plus of the proteome covered. So what of that is we essentially have at the ready identified about 150,000 binding sites on about 19,000 proteins in the proteome, which enables us to have lead chemical matter, meaning starting points to start developing drugs in 75% plus of cancer and immunology driver genes and about 50% plus of neurology and growing. So the so what of that is that basically enables us to do two things, right? One is have, again, starting points, starting chemical matter to develop drugs that we know have certain properties already from the get-go. Number two, it enables us using computationally enabled machine learning and other aspects that are proprietary to essentially design from scratch better fine-tuned molecules to target specific ligands that we want. And then three is enables us to accelerate drug development. What usually takes 5 years or so to clinical candidate, we're able to accelerate and do that within 18 to 24 months. So from chemistry to clinical candidate. And again, that has proven the platform that we have. So we now are talking publicly about 3 assets. One of them is in the clinic, targeting KRAS G12C. We expect interim clinical data on that trial in the second half of this year. We also, just at JP Morgan in January, declared that we're going to produce an IND for FMC 220, which is our second most advanced asset. It's the only covalent drug out there that binds to p53Y220C and achieves 100 times the potency at 10 times less the dose than the competition. And that should enter the clinic late this year, early next. And then we have a third asset, PI3K alpha, that is also marching towards development candidates and IND enabling studies later this year as well. And that is a high value target, as you saw in the Lilly Scorpion acquisition. So again, the proof is in the pudding, and I'm, it's quite marveling what these guys have been able to do for 6 years.
Yeah.
So that was a long-winded.
No, but it's super helpful. Just in terms of putting context to why Frontier, and then I suppose from more like a technical standpoint, like you went from investment banking to stepping into a CFO role in biotech, which is a move a lot of people have done. But what surprised you most about that move and potential responsibilities?
What surprised me the most is how much people matter, and when you're building a company. So a couple of good mentors, right? Gave me a heads up, right? That banking obviously is very different than operating a company for a number of reasons. Part of the reason that I also was looking to join a company was to really spend a bit more time building teams, which, in banking you can do, but it's a bit more sort of transactional and short term, right, in nature. But the part so I knew that was an area that I wanted to focus on and that I had to pay attention to. But the fun part now, and the part that surprised me the most is how creative you have to be, right, about psychology and motivating people in the right way, and making sure that you also enable right teams to work together and find the right incentives and find the right enthusiasm to do this. Because you can have the best scientists in the world, but if they either don't get along well or they don't have a clear objective that is set by leadership, or whatever the case may be, it's really hard to build a company, and in fact, it can really easily be destroyed as well. So all the things that have nothing to do with the science, that have nothing to do with financing, that have nothing to do with BD, M&A, all these things are actually what tend to matter the most.
Yeah, I think that's it's interesting, that move, because you've got all the building blocks, but it's almost moving to the other side and then reverse engineering in it in a way, just understanding,
Yeah.
you from an investment banker, right? You understand what's investable and how your mind would work in terms of working with that client, and then working on the other side. And
I mean, look, I look at it as a learning opportunity. I said it earlier, right? The way I look at it is across the leadership team at Frontier, we all have our areas of expertise relative to one another, right? All these things are relative, but we are all open enough and open-minded enough to with each other, and open-minded enough to learn from each other, right? So the way I'm thinking about it is, okay, I bring this to the table, and I contribute in that way. But I'm always thinking about it like a paid internship, right? Where I get to learn about how to run a company, how to think like an investor, how to think like a board member from Chris, how to think like a scientist from Kevin, right? How to think like a computational, machine learning expert from Johannes, how to think about operations from Sylvia, and all these things combined, right? How to think like a creative chemist from Dan, how to think like a lawyer from Mark, how to think like a people and culture person from Monique. So it's all like a paid internship. Again, I'll say it again, and you contribute your area of expertise to what you bring to the table.
Yeah, I remember this from when we met at JP Morgan in January. You spoke about how the leadership team at Frontier it has a bit of a different dynamic to other biotechs in terms of you do each take on each other's roles quite often.
Yeah, that's right. I think we contribute to each other. I don't know if more than most. I don't have a big enough sample size, but it certainly feels that way relative to what I'd seen in the past 13 years, and that's also what attracted me to it. Right, the fact that the leadership team meets at least once a week. Right, every decision is not necessarily debated ad nauseum, but we all know what we're working on. And opinions are welcome, and we do the same with the board, right? It's the communication with the board is extremely fluid, and in return, they are extremely supportive of us. So that's an environment that it's particularly welcome, especially in tough environment like we're living now, right? You want to have a team that sticks together. You want to have a board that is supportive. You want to have a board and a team where you can debate ideas, right, and debate creative ideas, because that's what you need in an environment that is not particularly conducive to flowing capital and flowing M&A and flowing ideas in general.
Yeah, you mentioned the market there as well. Like it is tough.
Yeah,
there's a lot of uncertainties. And some of the uncertainties that are becoming certain aren't necessarily the outcome that we wanted. But what do you think of the current market? Like, I'll leave that question quite broad purposely. Maybe just talk it through.
I mean, we're living in interesting times, right? We were speaking about this earlier. One is the biotech market had been correcting for a little bit already. And I'm using the word correction on purpose because having seen some of these cycles, the extreme that we saw of an incredible amount of IPOs per year, 75 plus, if I remember correctly, very early preclinical stage at extreme valuations, right, relative to where we are today, probably wasn't the healthiest either. And I say this with caution because some of my biotech peers may kill me for saying this, but that was arguably one side of the pendulum, right? And what happened is, the pendulum started to swing a little bit in the other direction, where, you had to start producing again proof of concept data for people to feel comfortable deploying capital into you, especially if you're gearing towards the public markets. Valuations were coming in a little bit, right, relative to close to the $1 billion mark that we had seen some companies approach in private markets, which makes an exit and IPO relatively difficult. Pharma at the same time is also getting a bit more selective, right? They still have a need, broadly speaking, to renew pipelines, but because of some acquisitions that they had to write off, pharma is also getting a bit more cautious and saying, well, I also want to see proof of concept data. I'll pay up gladly, but I need to see more to make sure that I'm buying into something that I trust. And all that stuff was good and well. And that's where we saw a couple of IPOs go this year, a handful of M&A early this year as well. And then, the whole swing and sort of uncertainty that is happening now around tariffs and global commerce is adding volatility to it. The VIX, which is the volatility index, 20 or so is broadly viewed as, if you're below 20, it's sort of IPO conducive. If it's above 20, it's you start to go into darker territory. And now we're about 60 last time I checked, and it wasn't 60 the VIX since the COVID days, right? So we're almost back to a pandemic type environment where the uncertainty just doesn't allow things to be priced in a normal way, because you don't know which way the market is swinging at any point in time. So what is all this driving? One, it's driving companies to have to generate more data, and as a result of that, investors in the private setting having to fund companies longer periods of time. It's driving pharma to be more cautious, and it's driving public investors to have to reposition their public investments to deal with the uncertainty that they're facing in the public markets. So again, things are getting a bit tighter, but I'm also of the mind, in a positive note, that when things get tighter and they don't get as conducive as historically some of the years have been, that's also the time where companies can differentiate, and where teams have to get together to find creative ways to continue to fund programs for the benefit of patients. And I think that's what Frontier is doing, and that's what our board and our team is enabling us to do.
Yeah, I'm going to throw it on you here a little bit as well. What do you think is going to happen? I know there's so many uncertainties. Probably the toughest question around at the moment, but
oh God, if I knew this, I'd be talking to you from the Caribbean with a little drink with a trolling umbrella. But no, I think what's going to happen is an acceleration. This is my guess. It's an acceleration of what we had to start, of what we started seeing. Over the past year and a half or two, right? Which is there's inevitably going to be sort of self-selection within biotechs, right? There's going to be mergers. There's going to be investors that are essentially trying to find synergies across portfolio companies, whether it's failed assets, reverse merger candidates type of deals, or simply synergies, right? You have a clinical program in targeted oncology. Company B has an earlier pipeline. Two companies combined can provide sort of a more robust pipeline that is able to sustain more catalyst over the public markets. And I think inevitably we're going to have to see a little bit of comeback in valuation, right? So all those things are going to happen. And as a result of that, again, you're going to see consolidation, arguably, in private markets and early public markets. You're probably going to see some self-selection, right, of companies that are returning capital to investors. And you're probably going to see pharma having, to be more mindful as to when and how they deploy capital, as we have seen in M&A deals in the first part of this year.
Do you think it's going to get worse before it gets better, i.e. like more layoffs, people holding S1s back, those kind of things?
Yeah, I mean, a different way of saying it is a lot of companies that at least I know of, right? And when you talk to bankers, the same thing, that we're thinking about going public in 26 and legitimately should have been able to do so based on the science, are probably postponing things into 26 at this point. Because keep in mind, like the year is also not as long, right? So summer is pretty much dead when it comes to pricing IPOs. Then there's the pockets of Thanksgiving, there's the pockets of Labor Day, there's the pockets of Christmas that you basically cannot really price IPOs in. So that really doesn't leave you with much room to operate. And I don't see this uncertainty going away anytime soon.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because hearing you say, well, look, people are now postponing looking at 2026. I remember people saying the same thing last year.
Exactly.
I remember there was this saying going around at the end of 2023 that I heard so many times, survive till 25. And
now survive to 26.
Yeah, companies thinking we get to 2025, we've done it. We're out of that. Yeah. But then obviously, new administration, uncertainties just on how unpredictable that is, and it's then changed again. So based on like predictions from 2 years ago, 1 year ago, we should have been really on the straight and narrow now, but I guess not.
Yeah, and look, that's a lesson learned, right, for all of us, for the ones that were more conservative, for the ones that were a bit more exuberant, it's, be mindful about capital deployment. Be mindful that good times, this too shall pass, as they say, right? Both good times and bad times, and focus on the science, right? That's what we're trying to do at Frontier. We're lucky enough that let's put it this way: things are painful enough because we do live in the current environment that's not lost on anybody. But we're also fortunate enough that look, we put our heads down for the past number of years, and we generated good science. We can proudly say that we have a good number of catalysts coming up later this year. Are diversified because each one of those are sort of independent from each other. Each one of them addresses a very specific market and a specific need for patients. Each one of them virtually has a public comparator out there when it comes to trading companies, and each one of them has very recent and tangible examples in M&A that prove that this, should have interest not only for patients but for pharma and investors. So that's the best we can do. And then on the heels of that, we'll explore financing options as every biotech does, and we'll take it from there. Yeah,
and then I also think this is super relevant, just given how the market's been these last few years, like mindset. It must be just so crucial for people wanting to be successful in biotech, but also just generally for leaders and people wanting to look up. Like, how do you see mindset in biotech? Is it something you concentrate a lot, or is it a side thought, or
how do I view my mindset in biotech, or just?
I think an overall what's needed from someone's mindset in this industry.
Yeah, I think it's a conviction of sort of realism, and or a mix. Sorry, a mix of realism and conviction, right? So what I mean by realism is, you have to read the room, right? You have to be extremely in tune and aware of what's happening around you when it comes to capital markets, the needs of patients, whether the science that you're pursuing is interesting from a scientific perspective, but may have not necessarily clinical legs, right? But at the same time, you also have almost blind conviction, right? That once you see a path, once you think that you've covered every angle that you could possibly cover, being aware that that's usually 80% of what you can see, because there's always some element that you just don't know that you don't know. But once you have that, you have to instill conviction, right, in your team, from a scientific perspective, from a people perspective, because these are relatively long-term bets that we're making, right? And you need to have that conviction and that inertia to drive that forward.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. Just a general resilience needed to be successful in biotech is pretty crazy.
Most of the things don't work out. Some
people go their whole career without seeing an approval.
Yeah, so that's some of these things you can mitigate, meaning you can try to join a team that is working on validated science, that has done it before, right? So you try to eliminate uncertainty, and that, in my opinion, highly improves your odds of being able to bring something successfully to patients. You can also take a mindful approach. So, for example, what we do at Frontier is our internal pipeline is focused on novel ways of targeting certain therapeutic areas and certain targets in oncology. But the science itself, right, the target itself is validated. So we know that the target does what it's supposed to do. The only thing we focus on is how to improve that targeting, right? That tackling of that particular protein or molecule or pathway. Then we take a different approach, right? AbbVie, our partnership with them is, if you read the headline, this is public, it's focused on hard to drug novel targets, right? So we also take that approach, which is, okay, we're the partner that we intellectually spar with, we will also choose to go after just, completely new things that if they shake out could be huge, right? And that's proving really well so far. So again, there's ways to sort of mitigate that uncertainty and try to do things well. And even then, some things can work against you. So again, that's where that self-awareness and trying to always be thinking about what you're missing comes into play. But then once you've made that decision, until the next check-in point, if you will, then that conviction is needed, because you need to build a team around this. You need to have conviction in the team. You have to instill conviction in your team as well. So that's what I think. Those are the two sides of the coin.
Yeah, I think it's genuinely interesting. It's something that's always fascinated me, mindset, and how the best of the best get to where they want to be from what they think up here. But yeah, I think let's wrap it up. And this is a question that we ask every guest. And I don't know if you've had a bit of a think about it, Gerardo, but
you did warn me.
Yeah. If you could have dinner with any scientist or innovator, past or present, who would it be and why?
I'd say Feynman, Richard Feynman. He's a staple of amongst all physicists, but the reason I say him is he had this really irreverent way to study things, right? He always instilled this. He had a humor about everything he did. If you read his book, Surely You Must Be Joking, Mr. Feynman, it's a hilarious story of how he approaches life in general. And what I like about him is he didn't necessarily approach physics like a physicist or approach life like a physicist, right? He always thought about passionately digging into things and understanding them, as opposed to sort of memorizing or sort of following the dogma. So it's somebody who worked hard but did so playfully, and I think that's beautiful. I think that's the way I would like to think about life, right? Work hard, but do so playfully and enjoy it along the way.
Yeah, enjoy the journey. I think some people always forget that, right? They're so focused on this end goal that they forget to stop and be grateful for what they've done so far and have a good time.
If you know what the end goal is, let me know. It's like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, right? Like 42. If you know that number, just tell me, because I don't. The best I can do is just, keep learning and enjoy what I do.
Yeah. Well, that's it. Yeah. And look, I think that's a great note to finish it on. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
And everyone, please like and subscribe to the BioHub. And thank you again, Gerardo.
Thank you.